You check your calendar. Everything is on track. You're meeting your deadlines. You're keeping up. But somehow, you still feel behind. Not behind on any specific task, just behind in general, like you're running to catch up with something you can't name. And no matter how much you finish, the feeling doesn't go away. It's exhausting. It makes you question whether you're doing enough, whether you're working hard enough, whether you're falling short without realizing it. But you're not falling short. You're just comparing yourself to something that doesn't exist. Most people think this feeling means they're actually behind, that if they feel it, there must be something they're missing, some deadline they forgot, some responsibility they're neglecting. So they work harder. They check their lists. They try to stay ahead. But the feeling doesn't fade, because the problem isn't what you're doing. It's what you think you should be doing. Your brain doesn't measure progress objectively. It measures it against expectations. And those expectations aren't based on reality. They're based on an idealized version of productivity that no one can sustain. Research shows that people consistently overestimate how much they should be able to accomplish in a given amount of time. They underestimate how long tasks take, and they forget to account for interruptions, delays, and the mental cost of switching between responsibilities. So when you plan your day, you're planning for a version of yourself that doesn't get tired, that doesn't get distracted, that doesn't need breaks or recovery time. And when you inevitably fall short of that impossible standard, you feel behind, not because you're slow, but because the standard was never realistic to begin with. Here's what that looks like in practice. You finish everything you plan to do today. You met your goals. But as you're wrapping up, you remember something else you wanted to accomplish. Something you didn't write down but thought you'd have time for. Now, instead of feeling accomplished, you feel incomplete because your brain shifted the goalpost. It added an expectation after the fact. And suddenly, what felt like a productive day feels like a missed opportunity. Or you look at your week. You finished your major tasks. You handled emergencies. You kept things moving. But when you reflect on it, all you see is what didn't happen. The things you didn't get to, the projects you didn't start. Your brain isn't celebrating progress, it's cataloging absence. And that absence feels like failure even when you were never supposed to do those things in the first place. This happens because your brain is wired to notice gaps. It's a survival mechanism. In uncertain environments, noticing what's missing keeps you alert, keeps you preparing, keeps you safe. But in modern life, there's always something missing. There's always more work, more emails, more ideas, more things you could be doing, and your brain treats all of it as equally important. So even when you're on schedule, your brain is scanning for what's undone, and it finds it because there's always something undone. There always will be. Now here's the uncomfortable part. The feeling of being behind isn't just internal. It's reinforced by the world around you. Social media shows you people who seem further ahead. Your workplace rewards those who do more. Your culture glorifies busyness and treats rest as laziness. You're surrounded by messages that tell you you're not doing enough, that you should be achieving more, that everyone else is moving faster. And your brain absorbs those messages even when you try to ignore them. Studies suggest that chronic feelings of being behind are linked to social comparison. Not comparing your work to your own standards, but comparing your life to everyone else's highlight reel. You see someone's finished project. You don't see the months of struggle behind it. You see someone's promotion. You don't see the burnout that came with it. And you measure your messy, complicated reality against their polished, edited presentation. That comparison is never fair, but your brain doesn't know that. It just knows you're not where they are, and it interprets that as falling behind. This doesn't mean the feeling isn't real. It doesn't mean you should ignore it completely. And it definitely doesn't mean you're imagining a problem that doesn't exist. It just means the feeling of being behind is often disconnected from actual progress. It's a feeling, not a fact. And feelings, no matter how convincing, don't always reflect reality. You feel behind even when you're on schedule, not because you're slow, but because your brain is measuring you against an impossible standard, a standard that includes everyone else's achievements, every possible task, and a version of yourself that never gets tired. That's not a fair comparison. That's not a useful metric, and it's definitely not a reflection of your worth or your effort. You're not behind. You're just living in a world that profits from making you feel like you are. And your brain, trying to keep you safe and successful, bought into the lie. The schedule says you're fine. The work says you're progressing, but the feeling says otherwise. And that gap between reality and perception is where the exhaustion lives. Not because you're failing, but because you're trying to meet a standard that was designed to be unreachable.